The silence in our Seattle apartment was deafening as I stared at my phone screen, reading the same message over and over again. Your account balance, $26.73. My hands trembled as I set my morning coffee down, the ceramic mug making a hollow sound against our marble kitchen counter. I, Emma Wilson, was stranded in Maui with less than $30 to my name, while my husband of 1 year was nowhere to be found. Just 12 hours earlier, Mark had kissed me goodnight in our luxury ocean view suite at the Grand Wailea Resort, promising to bring me breakfast in bed for our final morning in paradise. Now, in the harsh light of the Hawaiian morning, I found myself alone with nothing but a hastily written note. I'm sorry, Em. I can't do this anymore. The irony wasn't lost on me. 1 year ago, I'd walked down the aisle toward Mark Thompson, believing I was living a fairy tale. Now, on what should have been a romantic first anniversary celebration, I was living a nightmare. But let me start. From the beginning, because the signs were there all along, I just refused to see them. 6 months ago, Mark started acting different. The changes were subtle at first: late nights at the investment firm, missed calls, and mysterious weekend meetings. I chalked it up to stress from his recent promotion. After all, he'd just made junior partner, and his sister Lisa had warned me that the Thompson men tended to get intense about their careers. Lisa always seemed to have an explanation for her brother's behavior, always ready to smooth things over with a practiced smile and a gentle reminder that I needed to be more understanding. The suggestion for this anniversary trip came from Lisa, too. Mark feels terrible about being so distant lately, she told me over coffee at the Daily Grind, our regular spot in Queen Anne. He wants to make it up to you. Let me help plan something special. I should have known then that something was off. Lisa had never shown much interest in my happiness before, but I was so desperate to recapture the magic of our early relationship that I ignored my instincts. Everything seemed perfect when we first arrived in Maui. Mark was attentive, loving, just like the man I'd fallen in love with. We spent our first day snorkeling in Molokini Crater, and he held my hand as we watched the sunset from our private balcony. I'm sorry I've been so wrapped up in work, he'd said, pressing a kiss to my temple. This year hasn't been fair to you. I melted at his words, believing this trip meant a fresh start for us. But then came the first red flag. Mark insisted on keeping both our phones and wallets in the room safe, claiming he wanted us to be present in the moment. We're here to reconnect, he'd said with that charming smile that always made my knees weak. No distractions. It seemed romantic at the time. Now, standing in our emptied hotel suite, I realized it had been calculated. The safe was open and empty. My phone had been left on the bathroom counter, but my wallet was gone. So were Mark's belongings, every trace of him erased as if he'd never been there at all. My hands shook as I checked my banking app again, praying I'd read it wrong the first time. But the number hadn't changed. 2673. I sat on the edge of the perfectly made king-size bed, my mind racing. How had I not seen this coming? The way he'd insisted on merging our accounts after the wedding, claiming it would be easier to manage our finances together. The steady stream of money moving through our joint account that he'd attributed to investment opportunities. The late-night phone calls he'd take on the balcony, speaking in hushed tones. A knock at the door made me jump. "Housekeeping!" a cheerful voice called out. I glanced at the clock. 11:45 a.m. Checkout time was noon. In 15 minutes, I would officially be stranded in paradise with no money, no return ticket, and no husband. My hands were trembling as I picked up my phone and dialed the one person I knew I could trust. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Emma, aren't you supposed to be sipping Mai Tais on the beach right now?" "Rachel," I choked, out, my best friend's name catching in my throat. "I need help. Mark's gone. He's taken everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could picture Rachel's face shifting from confusion to concern. "What do you mean, gone?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "He left me here. Our accounts are empty. My wallet's gone. I don't even have enough money for a cab to the airport, let alone a flight home to Seattle." "That son of..." Rachel caught herself. "Okay, don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'm going to figure this out. Have you called the police?" Another knock at the door, more insistent this time. "Ma'am, checkout time is approaching," a male voice called. "Out." "I have to go," I whispered into the phone. "The hotel staff is here. Rachel, I don't know what to do." "Call the front desk," Rachel said firmly. "Tell them what's happened. I'm going to make some calls. Emma, listen to me. This is not your fault. We're going to figure this out." As I ended the call, I caught a glimpse of myself in the floor-length mirror. I was still wearing the white sundress Mark had bought me for this trip, my honey blonde hair pulled back in a loose braid. I looked like any other tourist in paradise, except for the fear I could see creeping into my hazel eyes. I grabbed my phone and the room key, taking one last look around the suite that had gone from romantic getaway to crime scene in the span of a morning. As I walked toward the front desk on shaking legs, I couldn't help but wonder, had any of it been real? The whirlwind romance, the fairy tale wedding, the promises of forever? Or had I just been a pawn in whatever game Mark was playing? The young man at the front desk, Michael according to his name tag, looked up as I approached. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked with a practiced smile. The name felt like a slap. How many times had I gushed about being Mrs. Thompson, so proud to take Mark's last name, to be part of his family? "My husband," I started, then had to clear my throat. "My husband is gone. He's taken everything, money, credit cards, our return tickets. I don't know what to do." Michael's smile faded, replaced by genuine concern. "Let me get my manager, Mrs. Thompson. Please, have a seat in the lobby." As I sank into a plush chair, watching happy couples stroll past with their beach bags and snorkel gear, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Called the Seattle PD. They're reaching out to Maui authorities. Hang tight. Help is coming." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. This wasn't just about being stranded anymore. This was about betrayal, about the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that this was only the beginning. The hotel manager's office felt impossibly small as I sat across from Mr. James Parker, watching him review the security footage from the previous night. The gentle whir of the ceiling fan did little to calm my nerves as I twisted my wedding ring around my finger, a nervous habit I'd developed over the past year. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Parker began, his voice carefully neutral. "The footage shows your husband leaving the hotel at approximately 4:15 a.m. He was carrying 2 bags and appeared to enter a silver rental car." He paused, studying my face. He wasn't alone. My heart stopped. "What do you mean, he wasn't alone?" Mr. Parker shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. "There was a woman with him. Dark hair, approximately 5'7". She appeared to be driving the vehicle. Lisa. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Mark's sister hadn't just helped plan this trip. She'd been here the whole time. The coffee meetings, the gentle suggestions, the constant reassurances about Mark's behavior, it had all been part of their plan. Officer Sarah Martinez arrived. Shortly after, her presence bringing a small measure of comfort to the chaos my life had become. She took detailed notes as I explained everything: the merged accounts, the missing documents, the empty safe. When I mentioned Lisa's involvement, she leaned forward, suddenly more alert. "Lisa Thompson?" she asked, checking her notes. "We've had reports about someone by that name in connection with similar incidents on other Hawaiian islands. Different names, different hotels, but the pattern. She trailed off, catching herself. Mrs. Thompson, I think there's more to this than a simple marital dispute. As Officer Martinez made calls and Mr. Parker arranged for me to stay in the hotel another night, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. My hands shook as I opened it. You really should have listened to your instincts, Emma. Mark told me how you questioned those late-night calls. Too bad you were too trusting to dig deeper. Sweet dreams. L. I nearly dropped the phone. Rachel had always said Lisa gave her the creeps, had warned me about how she seemed to have an unnatural hold over Mark. Nobody's that close to their sister, she'd said. Something's not right there. But I'd dismissed her concerns, eager to be accepted by Mark's family. The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements and phone calls. Rachel had contacted my parents in Portland, and they were already making arrangements to fly to Maui. My sister Olivia was handling things on the Seattle end, working with the local police to gather information about Mark's recent activities. It was nearly sunset when Officer Martinez returned with news that made my blood run cold. We've found similar cases in Kauai and the Big Island, she explained, spreading photographs across Mr. Parker's desk.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Couples checking in, the husband disappearing with valuables and money, sometimes with a female accomplice. The victims all report similar behaviors leading up to the incidents: merged accounts, suspicious phone calls, manipulative family members. I stared at the photos, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Different faces, different hotels, but the same story, the same betrayal, the same careful grooming of victims who thought they were living a love story. How wrong? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. How long has he been doing this? Officer Martinez's expression was sympathetic but professional. We've traced cases back 3 years. The woman, Lisa, if that's even her real name, appears in security footage from at least 5 different hotels, always with a different man, always targeting women with significant assets or good credit. The room spun as memories flooded back. The way Mark had insisted on getting married quickly, claiming he couldn't wait to start our life together. How he'd encouraged me to sell my condo and invest the money in our future. The subtle way he'd isolated me from friends who asked too many questions, always with a reasonable explanation that Lisa would later reinforce. Mrs. Thompson, Officer Martinez said gently, we're going to need you to help us build a case. There might be other victims out there, other women who haven't come forward. Your testimony could be crucial in stopping them. I thought about those other women, sitting in hotel rooms just like this one, realizing their whole lives had been an elaborate con. My fear began to crystallize into something harder, something that felt like determination. What do you need me to do? The next morning, I met with David Anderson from First Hawaiian Bank. Rachel had put me in touch with him, and he specialized in cases of financial fraud. As we went through my accounts, a pattern emerged that made me sick to my stomach. See these transfers? David pointed to a series of transactions. They were small at first, easily overlooked. But they gradually increased over time, always staying just under the amount that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. The money was moved through a series of offshore accounts before disappearing completely. I thought about the life savings I'd invested in our future, the inheritance from my grandmother that Mark had convinced me to add to our joint account. All gone, moved through a Byzantine maze of transactions designed to make recovery nearly impossible. The good news, David continued, is that they got sloppy near the end. Some of the transfers can be traced to accounts in Vancouver. That's consistent with what we've seen in other cases. They tend to use Canadian banks as a waypoint before moving the money further offshore. As we dug deeper into the financial trail, my phone buzzed with another message from Lisa. You should see your face right now sitting in that bank, Still trying to figure it all out. You know what's funny? Mark said you were the easiest Mark yet. Teachers are so trusting, he said. Guess he was right. My hands clenched into fists as I showed the message to Officer Martinez, who had joined us at the bank. She immediately began typing on her phone, coordinating with authorities in Vancouver. "This is good," she said. "They're getting cocky. Keep the messages coming. We can use them to track their location." That afternoon, I sat in my hotel room with Rachel on video chat, trying to piece together the timeline of Mark and Lisa's deception. Rachel had been doing some digging of her own, reaching out to mutual friends and acquaintances. You need to hear this," she said, her face serious. "Remember Jenny from the gym? She swears she saw Mark at a bar in Vancouver 6 months ago, with a woman who wasn't you. When I pressed her about it, she admitted she wasn't sure it was him. The guy she saw had darker hair, different style. But now we know they changed their appearances," I finished, thinking of the security footage from other hotels. "They probably have multiple identities, different looks for different cons." "There's more," Rachel continued. "I found their old house in Queen Anne, the one Mark claimed he grew up in. Property records show it was only purchased 3 years ago by a shell company. Everything about their background, their childhood, their family history, it was all fabricated." As Rachel talked, I walked to the balcony, looking out over the same ocean view that had seemed so romantic just days ago. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt almost obscene in their beauty. How could the world still be so beautiful when my entire life had been revealed as a lie? My phone buzzed again. Another message from Lisa. But this time, something was different. The preview showed an image, and my heart nearly stopped when I opened it. It was a photo of Mark and Lisa, but not as I knew them. In this picture, their hair was different. Their styling completely changed. They were standing in front of a different luxury hotel, their arms around another woman who was beaming at the camera. The message below the photo read, "Since you're being such a good sport about all this, thought you might like to see what's coming for the next lucky girl. Don't worry, Mark's really perfected his routine since you. He won't make the same mistakes twice." I forwarded the image to Officer Martinez immediately, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and vindication. They were taunting me, yes, but they were also giving us evidence. Each message, each photo, was another piece of the puzzle that would eventually bring them down. That night, as I lay in the same bed where Mark had kissed me goodnight just 2 days ago, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept going back to all the moments I'd ignored my instincts, all the red flags I'd dismissed because Lisa was there to explain them away. The late-night phone calls, the unexplained business trips, the way Mark would sometimes look at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it guilt? Contempt? Pity? My phone lit up with a text from Rachel. "You awake? Just got a call from Olivia. You need to see what she found in your Seattle apartment." I sat up, fully alert now. "What is it?" "Hidden compartment in Mark's home office. False bottom in one of the drawers. Passports, ID cards, different names, but all with his photo. And M. There are files, detailed notes about other women, their habits, their assets, their vulnerabilities. You weren't the first, and from what Lisa's been saying, they don't plan for you to be the last." I thought about the woman in the photo Lisa had sent, smiling unknowingly between 2 predators. She had no idea what was coming, just as I hadn't. But maybe, just maybe, we could stop them before they destroyed another life. "Rachel," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in days, "I need you to do something for me. Call Officer Martinez. Tell her everything you found, and then I need you to help me set a trap." The pieces were falling into place now. Mark and Lisa's cockiness, their taunting messages, their need to show off their success, it could all be turned against them. They thought they were playing with a broken victim, someone too devastated by betrayal to fight back. They had no idea that with every message, every photo, every mocking word, they were giving me exactly what I needed to bring them down. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I thought about the woman I'd been just days ago. Trusting, naive, desperately, in love with a man who had never really existed. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone stronger. Someone who understood that sometimes the greatest betrayals can lead to the most powerful transformations. My phone buzzed one last time. Another message from Lisa. "Sweet dreams, Emma. Tomorrow's another day in paradise." I smiled grimly in the darkness. Yes, tomorrow was another day. And it would bring them one step closer to facing justice for every life they'd destroyed, every heart they'd broken, every dream they'd shattered in their endless pursuit of their next mark. But first, I had to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Tomorrow would begin with a visit to every hotel on their trail, every scene of their previous cons. I needed to know their patterns, their preferences, their weaknesses, and somewhere in all that information, I would find what I needed to stop them once and for all. The gentle sound of waves crashing against the shore drifted through my open balcony door, a constant reminder that I was still stranded in what should have been paradise. But maybe, just maybe, this paradise would become their prison instead. Morning sunlight streamed through the hotel room windows as I stared at my laptop screen, scanning through dozens of photos Officer Martinez had sent over. Each image told the same story with different faces: happy couples checking into luxury resorts across Hawaii, followed by security footage of solitary women discovering they'd been conned. The timestamps stretched back 3 years, painting a pattern of calculated deception that made my stomach turn. A knock at my door made me jump. It was Michael, the hotel staff member who'd been helping me since day one. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, quickly correcting himself from using my married name. "There's someone here to see you." Rebecca Foster? She says she's a travel agent." My heart rate quickened. Rebecca Foster had been the agent who'd booked our anniversary trip. Or so I'd thought. When I walked into the hotel lobby, I found a petite woman in her 50s waiting anxiously, clutching a leather portfolio. "Emma?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, but when I saw the police bulletin, I think I have information you need to see." She opened her portfolio, revealing a stack of booking records. 3 years ago, I helped the police investigate a similar case in Kauai. The couple seemed so in love, but then Rebecca's voice trailed off as she pulled out a photograph. My breath caught in my throat. The man in the photo was undeniably Mark, but with lighter hair and different facial hair. The woman beside him wasn't Lisa this time. It was someone else entirely, someone who shared Lisa's predatory smile. "They work with a network," Rebecca explained, spreading more photos across the coffee table. "Different combinations, different roles, but always the same method. The travel agency booking gives them inside information about their target's financial status, travel patterns, everything they need to plan the perfect con." Officer Martinez arrived as Rebecca was walking me through the documentation. Each booking revealed another piece of the puzzle: credit card numbers that led nowhere, fake IDs that had passed every security check, carefully crafted backstories that fell apart under scrutiny. "The woman who booked your trip," Rebecca said, pulling up an email on her tablet. She used the name Lisa Thompson, but look at the signature line. The email was signed L. Morgan. A quick search revealed similar bookings under variations of the same name: Lauren Morgan, Louie Morgan, Linda Morgan. "Morgan," I whispered, the name triggering a memory. "Mark had a phone call last month. I only heard part of it, but he mentioned something about the Morgan account being ready." Officer Martinez was immediately on her phone, coordinating with her team. "Morgan could be their actual surname," she said, "or it could be a code name for their operation. Either way, it's the first solid lead we've had on their wider network. As we dug deeper into the travel records, a pattern emerged. The bookings always followed a similar timeline. Romantic getaways booked months in advance, usually targeting special occasions like anniversaries or birthdays. The perpetrators took time to establish trust, to make their marks feel special and secure before executing their plan. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "M, you need to see this. Olivia found something in your storage unit." Attached was a photo of a stack of papers, loan applications I'd never seen before, all bearing my signature, or rather, what appeared to be my signature. They've been planning this for months, I realized, showing the photo to Officer Martinez. Those loan applications, they must have been practicing my signature, preparing to take out loans in my name after they cleaned out our accounts. Just then, another message came through, this time from Lisa's number. It was a video. My hands shook as I pressed play. The footage showed Mark in what appeared to be a hotel room, teaching someone how to forge signatures. The key, he was saying, is to practice until it becomes muscle memory. Emma's signature is simple. 3 basic strokes. We can use that. Officer Martinez immediately sent the video to her forensics team. "This is getting too elaborate for a simple con," she mused. "The network, the multiple identities, the long-term planning. They're running something bigger than we thought." Back in my room that evening, I spread everything we'd gathered across the bed: travel records, banking documents, photos of previous victims. Rachel was on video chat, helping me piece together the timeline. "Look at this," she said, sending another photo. "Remember that charity gala Mark insisted you attend last spring? The one where he introduced you to all those business associates?" The photo showed the gala in full swing, and in the background, barely visible, was Lisa, or whoever she really was, talking to another couple who looked eerily similar to Mark and me. They were scouting, I realized, using the gala to find their next targets. All those couples Mark introduced me to. How many of them were victims? How many were part of the scheme? A soft ding from my laptop interrupted my thoughts. An email from an anonymous address. Subject line: "Thought you might want to see this." Inside was a video file. Officer Martinez had warned me about opening unknown attachments, but something made me click play. The video showed a hotel conference room, filled with people I recognized from various events Mark had taken me to. At the front of the room stood Lisa, delivering what appeared to be a training session. "Remember," she was saying, "the key is to make them fall in love not just with you, but with the life you're promising them." Emma was perfect. Young teacher, romantic at heart, just enough savings to make it worth our while. The trick is to find the ones who want so badly to believe in love that they'll ignore every red flag. Rage coursed through me as I watched Lisa dissect my life, my dreams, my vulnerabilities, using them as a teaching tool for what appeared to be a room full of con artists in training. The video ended with Lisa looking directly at the camera, smirking. "Class dismissed," she said with a wink. I forwarded the video to Officer Martinez, my hands shaking with anger. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about destroying people's ability to trust, to love, to believe in genuine connection. They weren't just stealing savings, they were stealing souls. Rachel's voice brought me back to reality. There's something else. I've been going through your wedding photos." She shared her screen, zooming in on various shots from the reception. "Look at the backgrounds. In every major moment. The first dance, the cake cutting, the toasts. There's someone watching. Different faces, but the same predatory attention. They were all there, weren't they? The whole network, celebrating their latest successful mark." The realization hit me like a physical blow. My wedding hadn't just been a celebration of love, it had been a graduation ceremony of sorts, Mark's ultimate proof that he could execute the perfect con. Every tender moment, every heartfelt vow had been a performance for an audience of criminals. A new text from Lisa's number appeared. "Getting warmer, Emma. But you're still missing the biggest piece of the puzzle. Want a hint? Check the guest. List from your engagement party. Pay special attention to the plus ones." I pulled up the photos from our engagement celebration, studying each face with new awareness. Then I saw it, the pattern Rachel had noticed at the wedding. Couples who looked just a little too perfect, who paid just a little too much attention to the other guests. How many of them were part of the network? How many had been targets? Officer Martinez called just as I was about to dive deeper into the photos. "Emma, we've got movement. Vancouver PD just reported activity on one of the accounts we've been monitoring. A large withdrawal from a bank near Granville Street. And there's security footage you need to see." The footage showed Mark entering the bank, but he wasn't alone. The woman with him wasn't Lisa this time. It was someone I recognized from our engagement party. Someone who'd been introduced as a cousin's girlfriend. The network was bigger than we'd imagined, and they were still operating, still targeting new victims. "They're getting sloppy," Officer Martinez noted. "Making withdrawals in person, sending taunting messages. It's like they want us to catch them." Or, I said slowly, a new thought forming, they want us focused on these transactions while they're planning something bigger. Lisa's message about missing the biggest piece of the puzzle. What if all of this, even getting caught on camera, is just misdirection? I spent the next few hours reviewing everything we knew, looking for patterns we might have missed. The travel agency bookings, the forged signatures, the network of con artists. It all felt like pieces of a larger scheme. But what? Then it hit me. I called Officer Martinez immediately. "The Morgan account," I said as soon as she answered. "Mark mentioned it was ready last month. What if it's not just a surname or a code name? What if it's a bank?" I could hear typing in the background as Officer Martinez ran the search. "Morgan Stanley," she said after a moment. "There's a private wealth management office in Vancouver, right near where Mark was spotted. And according to their records, there's a significant transaction pending, scheduled for tomorrow morning." My heart raced as the pieces finally clicked into place. The individual cons, the stolen identities, the forged documents, they were all building up to something bigger. Tomorrow morning, they were going to try to execute their master plan, whatever it was. "We need to stop them," I said, already throwing essentials into my bag. "If they succeed with this transaction—" "Emma, no," Officer Martinez cut in. Firmly. "You're not going to Vancouver. Let us handle this." But as I looked at the latest taunting message from Lisa, displaying a countdown clock with the text, T-minus 12 hours until the real show begins, I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. These people had destroyed my life, and who knew how many others. They thought they knew everything about me, had calculated every possible response. What they hadn't calculated was how much stronger you become when you have nothing left to lose. I looked out at the Hawaiian sunset one last time, watching as the sky turned from gold to deep purple. Tomorrow would bring either justice or more heartbreak, but either way, I was done being a victim. It was time to become the hunter instead of the prey. The next move in this deadly game would be mine. The Vancouver International Airport buzzed with early morning activity as I made my way through customs, my heart pounding with every step. Officer Martinez would be furious when she discovered I'd left Hawaii, but I couldn't sit idle while Mark and Lisa executed their grand finale. Rachel had helped me book the red-eye flight using her credit card, making sure to keep the transaction off any radar that might alert the network to my movements. Dawn was breaking over the city skyline as my taxi wound through downtown Vancouver's streets. The Morgan Stanley building loomed ahead, its glass exterior reflecting the pink and orange hues of sunrise. According to the intelligence we'd gathered, the major transaction was scheduled for 9 a.m. I had less than 3 hours to position myself. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, I thought it might be Lisa, but the Message was different. Coffee shop across from Morgan Stanley. Back booth. Come alone. It was signed simply M. Every instinct told me this could be a trap, but something about the terseness of the message felt different from Lisa's taunting notes. I directed the taxi driver to drop me off a block away from the coffee shop, giving myself time to survey the area. The cafe was barely occupied at this early hour. A few business people typed away on laptops, while baristas prepared for the morning rush. In the back booth, partially hidden by a decorative partition, sat a woman I recognized from my wedding photos. She had been introduced as Mark's college friend Michelle, though I now doubted every detail of that introduction. "You're either very brave or very foolish," she said as I slid into the booth across from her. "Probably both." She pushed a manila envelope across the table. "I'm guessing you're here to stop the Morgan transfer." I kept my hands in my lap, not touching the envelope. "Why are you helping me?" Michelle, if that was even her name, glanced around before leaning forward. "Because some of us want out. This thing. It's grown beyond what any of us signed up for. Mark and Lisa, they're not just running cons anymore. They're building something bigger, something dangerous." The waitress approached, and Michelle waited until she'd left with our coffee orders before continuing. "The Morgan transfer isn't just about money. It's about power. They've spent years gathering dirt on some of the most influential people in the Pacific Northwest. Blackmail material, compromising photos, evidence of financial misconduct. Tomorrow's transaction is just a cover for the real plan." My coffee arrived, but I couldn't bring myself to drink it. What real plan? They're selling information, not just about their marks, but about everyone they've gathered dirt on. Politicians, business leaders, judges. The money from the cons was just seed funding for their real enterprise. Corporate espionage and blackmail on a massive scale. The envelope sat between us like a live wire. What's in there? Access codes, security protocols, everything. "You need to stop the transfer, but Emma." Michelle's eyes met mine, and I saw genuine fear there. "If you do this, there's no going back. These people, the ones buying the information, they're not like Mark and Lisa. They don't just take your money and disappear. They make problems disappear." I thought about all the lives Mark and Lisa had destroyed. All the people they'd manipulated and betrayed. "I disappeared once already," I said, finally reaching for the envelope. "Their mistake was teaching me how to come back stronger." Michelle nodded, sliding out of the booth. "Watch your back. And Emma, check the wedding video, the real one, not the edited version they gave you. Sometimes the truth is hiding in plain sight." She was gone before I could ask what she meant. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, finding pages of technical documentation and what appeared to be internal Morgan Stanley security protocols. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "Storage Unit 247, Pacific Central Station. The video is there." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lisa. "Getting warmer, but still so far behind. Maybe if you'd paid more attention during the wedding, instead of playing the blushing bride, you'd have figured it out sooner." The pieces started falling into place. The wedding hadn't just been a celebration of their successful con, it had been an operation. While Mark kept me distracted with romantic gestures and tender moments, their network had been working the room, gathering intelligence on our influential guests. I hailed another taxi, directing it to Pacific Central Station. The storage facility was in the basement level, dimly lit and smelling of damp concrete. Unit 247 was secured with a digital lock, but the code was simple: my wedding date. Another mind game from Mark and Lisa. Inside, I found a laptop and several external hard drives. The wedding video was already queued up on the screen. This version was different from the one we'd received from the videographer. The camera angles were wider, catching moments that had been edited out of our copy. As I watched, I saw what Michelle meant about the truth hiding in plain sight. In the background of every shot, members of the network were at work. A woman in a blue dress photographing documents left in guests' coats. A groomsman placing what looked like recording devices under tables. Mark's college roommate having intense conversations with various guests in secluded corners. But it was the footage from the reception that made my blood run cold. While I was sharing our first dance with Mark, Lisa was in my father's study. We'd held the reception at my parents' Portland home. The camera caught her accessing his computer, downloading files. My father was a senior partner at one of Portland's most prestigious law firms. How much sensitive information had they stolen that day? A new text lit up my phone. "Time's running out, Emma. T-minus 90 minutes until the real fireworks begin. Sure you want to spend it watching old home movies?" I downloaded copies of everything onto my phone, sending backups to both Rachel and Officer Martinez. Then I headed to Morgan Stanley, Michelle's security protocols clutched in my hand like a shield. The lobby was starting to fill with employees arriving for work. I approached the security desk, heart pounding. "I have an appointment with Private Wealth Management," I said, using the reference number from Michelle's documents. "Emma Thompson." The guard checked his computer, nodding. "Yes, Mrs. Thompson. You're expected on the 14th floor. Robert will escort you." As the elevator climbed, I thought about Michelle's warning. The people behind this weren't just cons, artists. They were powerful, dangerous individuals who'd stop at nothing to protect their interests. But they had underestimated me once already, thinking I was just another naive victim who would crawl away to lick my wounds. The 14th floor opened onto a pristine reception area. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Mark and Lisa, along with several people I recognized from the wedding video. They were setting up for a presentation, likely the cover for their real transaction. My phone buzzed one final time. "Look behind you." I turned to find Michelle stepping off another elevator, but she wasn't alone. Two men in dark suits flanked her, their expressions grim. "I'm sorry, Emma," she said softly. "They knew I'd warn you. They've known every move you'd make since Hawaii." Mark emerged from the conference room, that familiar, charming smile on his face. "Did you really think we'd let you get this far if we weren't planning for it? Every text, every clue, every breadcrumb. We've been leading you exactly where we wanted you." Lisa joined him, looking sleek and dangerous in a charcoal business suit. "The thing about being good at cons, Emma, is understanding human nature. Your need for justice, for answers, it made you so predictable. Almost as predictable as your romantic nature." The men in suits moved closer, but I stood my ground. "You're right," I said, pulling out my phone. "I am predictable. And since you know me so well, you probably predicted I'd record everything. Michelle just told me about your real operation, that I'd back up the unedited wedding video showing your network stealing information from guests, that I'd forward all of it to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." Mark's smile faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your phones." They did, and I saw the moment they realized their mistake. Every phone in the room lit up simultaneously with the same message. "Evidence received. Agents en route. Do not attempt to leave the building." Lisa's composure cracked. "You couldn't have... What was it you said in your text? The truth was hiding in plain sight?" "Well, here's the truth you missed. I'm not just the same naive teacher you marked as an easy target. I'm the daughter of one of Portland's top lawyers. I grew up learning about corporate law, about evidence chains, about building cases." The elevator dinged behind me, and this time it was Officer Martinez who stepped out, accompanied by a team of FBI agents. "Emma," she said with a slight smile, "I thought I told you to stay in Hawaii." "Sorry," I replied, not taking my eyes off Mark and Lisa. "I had a pressing engagement." As the agents moved in, reading rights and securing suspects, I finally allowed myself to really look at the man I'd married. He seemed smaller somehow, less charming, less substantial. The illusion had been shattered, revealing the hollow man beneath. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" I asked him as an moo. Agent secured his wrists with handcuffs. "You taught me too well. All those lessons about creating the perfect con, about understanding your Mark's psychology, I was learning too. And when it mattered most, I used everything you taught me against you." Lisa snarled as she was led past me. "This isn't over. You have no idea how deep this goes, how many people are involved." "You're right," I agreed. "It's not over. Because now we have your entire network on video, your complete client list, and evidence of every crime you've committed. And I'm going to make sure every single person involved faces justice." The sun was high in the Vancouver sky as I left. The Morgan Stanley building hours later, after giving my statement to the FBI. Rachel had already booked my flight back to Seattle, where my parents were waiting. There would be months of legal proceedings ahead, testimonies to give, evidence to process. But as I looked up at the glass tower reflecting the summer light, I felt something I hadn't experienced since finding that note in my hotel room in Maui. Peace. They had tried to destroy me, to make me another cautionary tale in their collection of broken lives. Instead, they had forced me to discover my own strength, my own capacity for strategic thinking and decisive action. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Rachel. "You did it, Em. You're free." Free. The word echoed in my mind as I headed toward the airport. Free from the lies, from the manipulation, from the carefully constructed facade of a perfect marriage. They had taken everything from me, thinking it would break me. Instead, it had rebuilt me into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who would never again mistake pretty lies for love. The Vancouver skyline receded behind me as my taxi wound through downtown. Somewhere in the city, Mark and Lisa were being processed into federal custody, their network of deceit finally crumbling around them. They had spent years perfecting the art of the long con, but in the end, their greatest creation, the naive, trusting woman they thought they could easily destroy, had become their ultimate undoing. I looked down at my wedding ring, still, sitting on my finger like a souvenir from someone else's life. It was time to let go of the last physical reminder of their deception. Rolling down the taxi window, I slipped the ring off my finger and held it up, watching it catch the sunlight one final time. Then I let it fall, leaving behind the last piece of the woman I used to be. The Seattle courtroom felt impossibly large. As I sat on the witness stand, my voice steady despite the weight of what I was about to reveal. 6 months had passed since that morning in Vancouver, and now I found myself facing not just Mark and Lisa, but an entire network of sophisticated criminals whose web of deception stretched further than anyone had initially suspected. "Ms. Wilson," the federal prosecutor began, adjusting her glasses, "please tell the court about the documents you discovered in Storage Unit 247. Behind her, I could see Mark and Lisa sitting with their defense team, their designer suits replaced by muted business attire meant to convey respectability. They'd lost their polished glamour in the months of custody, but their eyes still held that calculating gleam I'd come to recognize. The storage unit contained extensive documentation of their operation, I explained, my fingers tracing the water glass before me. Not just records of their romantic cons, but detailed files on hundreds of influential people, judges, CEOs, politicians. They weren't just stealing money, they were gathering leverage. The evidence had been damning. The FBI's forensic team had uncovered years of meticulously organized blackmail material. Each wedding, each charity gala, each social event had been an intelligence gathering operation disguised as a celebration. My own wedding video had been just the tip of the iceberg. "And how did you become aware of the storage unit's existence?" The prosecutor continued. I recounted the meeting with Michelle, now known by her real name, Margaret Chen. She'd turned state's evidence, revealing the inner workings of what the media had dubbed the honeymoon hackers. Her testimony had been crucial in understanding the true scope of the operation. As I spoke, I noticed movement in the gallery. Rachel was there, as always, offering silent support. But behind her sat rows of other women, previous victims who'd come forward after the arrests. Some I recognized from the files, others I'd met during support group meetings. Each had their own story of betrayal, their own journey from victim to survivor. The defense attorney rose for cross-examination, his approach aggressive from the start. Ms. Wilson, isn't it true that you accessed private banking systems using stolen security codes? That you essentially committed corporate espionage yourself? Objection, Your Honor, the prosecutor interjected. Ms. Wilson's actions were part of an approved FBI operation. The judge sustained the objection, but the defense attorney's implication hung in the air. They were trying to paint me as a willing participant turned vindictive ex-wife. It was a strategy I'd been warned about, but the reality of facing it still stung. During the lunch recess, I found myself in the courthouse bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. The door opened, and I tensed, half expecting Lisa or one of her associates. Instead, it was a woman I'd seen in the gallery, someone I recognized from the files but had never met. "I'm Catherine," she said softly. "Catherine Morrison. They got me 3 years ago in Portland. Lost everything except my daughter's college. Fund. I'd hidden that in my mother's name." She paused, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "I never thought I'd have the courage to face them in court, but watching you up there..." Her words trailed off, but I understood. Each testimony, each piece of evidence, was another nail in the coffin of Mark and Lisa's operation. We weren't just seeking justice for ourselves. We were preventing future victims. The afternoon session brought a surprise witness, the real Lisa Thompson. The woman I'd known as Mark's sister was actually Caroline Reeves, a longtime con artist with connections to organized crime. The real Lisa had been living in Arizona, unaware her identity had been stolen and used in numerous fraud schemes. "Ms. Reeves," the prosecutor addressed her, "please explain to the court how you selected your targets." Caroline's response was chillingly methodical. "We looked for specific personality types, intelligent but trusting, successful but lonely, people with enough assets to make it worthwhile, but also with an emotional vulnerability we could exploit." She glanced at me. "Teachers were particularly good targets. They're usually intelligent, compassionate, and often have substantial retirement savings." The testimony continued for hours, revealing layer after layer of deception. The network had operators in major cities across North America, each playing their part in an intricate dance of deceit. Mark, whose real name turned out to be David Reynolds, had been one of their most successful operatives, specializing in long-term cons that involved marriage. During a brief recess, Officer Martinez found me in the corridor. "We've identified 3 more storage units," she said quietly. "The evidence inside. Emma, this goes beyond anything we imagined. They have dirt on Supreme Court justices, federal prosecutors, even members of Congress." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about stolen money and broken hearts anymore. The network had been positioning themselves to influence judicial decisions, manipulate legislative votes, control the very systems meant to protect against such corruption. Back in the courtroom, the prosecution presented financial evidence that made my head spin. The network had accumulated over $50 million through their various schemes, but that was just the visible part. The real value lay in the information they'd gathered, the secrets they'd collected, the leverage they'd built. "Ms. Wilson," the prosecutor asked, "what made you suspicious enough to investigate deeper than the initial theft?" I leaned into the microphone, my voice clear and steady. "It was the little things at first. Inconsistencies in stories, patterns in behavior. But mostly, it was their arrogance. They were so confident in their ability to manipulate people that they got sloppy. They left trails, thinking no one would be brave enough or smart enough to follow them. The defense attorney objected, calling my response speculative, but the damage was done. The jury had seen what I'd seen: the calculated nature of the deception, the cold precision with which they'd targeted their victims. As the day drew to a close, the prosecutor presented her final piece of evidence: a recorded conversation between Caroline and David from the Vancouver operation. Their voices filled the courtroom, discussing their next targets with casual cruelty. "The judge in Portland looks promising," Caroline was saying. "Her son's gambling debts give us the perfect opening. And that prosecutor in Seattle, the one handling the Martinez case? His affair with his law clerk is just begging to be leveraged." The recording continued, revealing plans to manipulate court cases, influence political decisions, and destroy anyone who threatened to expose them. It was the smoking gun the prosecution had been waiting for. Clear evidence that their operation went far beyond simple fraud. In the gallery, I watched faces pale as people recognized names, connected dots, understood the true scope of what they'd been dealing with. This wasn't just a criminal case anymore. It was potentially one of the largest corruption scandals in recent history. The judge called for adjournment, scheduling closing arguments for the following day. As the courtroom emptied, I gathered my belongings, exhausted but determined. Rachel waited for me by the door, ready to drive us back to my new apartment in Capitol Hill. "You did great," she said, squeezing my hand. "They didn't stand a chance." But something still nagged at me. In all the months of investigation, in all the evidence we'd uncovered, we'd never found the complete client list. The people who'd been buying the information, using it to manipulate the system. The network was being dismantled, but its beneficiaries remained in the shadows. That night, as Rachel and I sat in my living room reviewing trial notes, my phone lit up with a message from an encrypted number. "You've only scratched the surface. Want to go deeper? Tomorrow noon, Pike Place Market? Come alone." I showed the message to Rachel, who immediately shook her head. "No way. It's too dangerous. We should tell Martinez." But I knew this might be our only chance to uncover the rest of the truth. The trial had exposed the mechanics of the operation, but not its ultimate purpose. Who had been pulling the strings? Who had been using the gathered information to influence policy, manipulate markets, control justice itself? "I have to go," I said finally. "We need to know how far this really goes." Rachel argued, but eventually relented, agreeing to be nearby, with Officer Martinez on standby. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I thought about how far I'd come from that morning in Maui. I was no longer the trusting teacher who'd fallen for a carefully crafted lie. I'd become something else. Someone stronger, more determined, more dangerous to those who dealt in deception. My phone buzzed again. "Sweet dreams, Emma. Tomorrow you'll learn what your perfect marriage was really about. Hope you're ready for the truth." I stared at the message, feeling not fear, but a fierce determination. They thought they'd broken me in Maui, but they'd actually set me free. Free from naivety, free from manipulation, free to become someone who could fight back. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new dangers, new challenges. But I was ready. The network had taught me well, perhaps too well. They'd shown me how to spot lies, how to gather evidence, how to think 3 steps ahead. Now, I would use everything I'd learned to expose not just the con artists, but the powerful figures who'd been using them to subvert justice itself. The Seattle skyline glittered outside my window. The Space Needle illuminated against the night sky. Somewhere out there, people were nervous about tomorrow's meeting. People with power, with influence, with everything to lose if the truth came out. Let them be nervous, I thought. They asked if I was ready for the truth. The real question was, were they ready for me? Pike Place Market hummed with its usual midday energy as I made my way through the crowds, my heart racing despite my outward calm. Rachel and Officer Martinez were positioned strategically nearby. Rachel blending in among the flower vendors, while Martinez sat at a corner cafe pretending to work on her laptop. The message had specified the famous fish-throwing stand as our meeting point. I arrived early, positioning myself where I could observe approaching figures from multiple angles. Years of teaching had given me an eye for detail and behavior patterns that now served a different purpose. At exactly noon, a woman in a crisp business suit approached. She couldn't have been more different from Caroline's flashy style. Everything about her radiated corporate efficiency. "Follow me," she said without preamble, "and leave your phone here." I'd anticipated this request and brought a decoy phone, leaving my real one with Rachel. I made a show of reluctantly placing the decoy on a nearby ledge. The woman nodded approvingly and led me through the market's winding passages to a service elevator I'd never noticed before. We descended to what appeared to be a private wine cellar beneath one of the market's oldest restaurants. The space was dimly lit but immaculate, with walls of vintage bottles and a massive oak table dominating the center. 3 people waited, there, 2 men and a woman, all exuding the same aura of quiet power as my guide. "Ms. Wilson," the older man spoke first, his voice carrying a slight Boston accent. "Thank you for coming. I'm Senator James Morrison." He didn't introduce the others, but I recognized the woman, Judge Patricia Lancaster, recently nominated to the Federal Appeals Court. The younger man remained a mystery, but his bearing suggested military or intelligence background. "Why am I here?" I asked, remaining standing despite the empty chair they'd clearly left for me. The senator smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Because you're dangerously close to uncovering something that could destabilize not just a few corrupt officials, but the entire Western Seaboard's power structure. We'd like to offer you an alternative to that outcome." Judge Lancaster spoke next, her tone measured. "What you've uncovered with Mark, or David, as you now know him, and Caroline's network is merely the surface layer. Their operation was designed to appear criminal while serving a much more complex purpose. We call it Project Mirror," the younger man said, speaking for the first time. "A carefully orchestrated system of checks and balances, ensuring that power remains in the hands of those who understand how to wield it responsibly." The implications slowly dawned on me. "You're saying the network was working for you? That all those cons, all those ruined lives were part of some government operation?" "Not government," Senator Morrison corrected. "Think of us as concerned citizens with the resources and vision to maintain order. The information gathered by the network doesn't just give us leverage, it gives us the ability to prevent chaos, to guide policy in productive directions." Judge Lancaster leaned forward. "Your marriage to David wasn't random, Emma. We chose you specifically because of your position at Seattle Prep. The children of some of the most influential families in the Pacific Northwest passed through your classroom. You were meant to be our eyes and ears in that world." My mind raced back to all the parent-teacher conferences, the casual conversations with students about their families' activities. How much information had I unknowingly passed to Mark during our marriage? "Why tell me this now?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand. The younger man smiled. "Because you've proven yourself exceptional. Most Marks either crumble or seek simple revenge. You methodically dismantled a complex operation, demonstrated strategic thinking, and showed remarkable resilience. We're offering you a chance to join us, to be part of the solution rather than another voice crying corruption." A folder appeared on the table between us. Inside were documents detailing a new identity, a position at a prestigious private school in Washington, DC-1 and bank accounts with balances that made me dizzy. All I had to do was walk away from the trial, issue a statement recanting my testimony, claim emotional stress had clouded my judgment. And if I refuse, Senator Morrison's smile faded. Then the truth about your father's involvement in the Patterson case comes out. You remember that case, don't you? The one that made his career? Amazing how certain evidence vanished, how key witnesses changed their stories. My blood ran cold. They were threatening to destroy not just me, but my entire family. The Patterson case had been my father's proudest achievement, a corruption case that had cleaned up Portland's dock workers' union. If what they were implying was true. I need time to think, I said, buying myself precious seconds to process everything. You have until midnight, Judge Lancaster replied. After that, things will be set in motion that can't be stopped. As my guide led me back through the market's maze, my mind was already racing through possibilities. They thought they were offering me a choice between power and destruction, but they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd revealed themselves, shown their hand, assumed I was alone. Back in the market's main thoroughfare, I retrieved the decoy phone and made my way to the rendezvous point with Rachel and Martinez. As I walked, I noticed things I hadn't before. How certain vendors watched my progress, how tourists with cameras seemed too interested in my movements. The network wasn't just criminal, it was an entire shadow infrastructure. Rachel's flower stall came into view, and I gave our predetermined signal, adjusting my hair twice. Within moments, she and Martinez had flanked me, creating a barrier between me and any observers as we made our way to Martinez's unmarked car. Well? Rachel asked once we were safely moving through downtown traffic. I took a deep breath and revealed everything. Project Mirror, the true purpose of the network, the threats against my family. Martinez listened silently, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. This goes higher than anything we imagined, she finally said. We're talking about systematic manipulation of the entire justice system. They made 3 mistakes, I said. My teacher's habit of analyzing patterns, taking over. First, they assumed I was working alone. Second, they thought threatening my family would paralyze me with fear. And third, I pulled out my real phone, showing them the recording app that had been running the entire time. You recorded? Everything? Rachel gasped. They took my decoy phone but never checked for another one. I had it in my purse's hidden compartment, something I learned from studying their own techniques. Martinez pulled into an underground parking garage, turning to face me. This is incredibly dangerous information, Emma. What they're describing, it's essentially a shadow government. I know, I replied, thinking of all the lives they'd ruined in service of their supposed greater good. But they've given us exactly what we need to expose everything. They're so convinced of their own superiority that they openly admitted to orchestrating criminal enterprises. Rachel touched my arm gently. Your father, if what they said about the Patterson case is true, then he'll face whatever consequences come, I said firmly. That's the difference between us and them. We believe in real justice, not manufactured order. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Martinez brought in trusted FBI agents, copying and securing the recording. Rachel helped me document everything I could remember about the meeting's participants. We were building a case that would shake the foundations of power on the West Coast. As midnight approached, my phone lit up with a text from the same encrypted number. Time's up, Emma. What's it going to be? Power or destruction? I smiled as I typed my reply. You forgot the third option, the truth. Within seconds, alarms began blaring in the FBI office. Reports flooded in of data breaches, leaked documents, system failures. They were making their move, trying to destroy evidence before we could act. But we'd anticipated this. While they'd been focused on me, Martinez's team had been quietly gathering backup copies of everything, securing witnesses, preparing for this moment. The very techniques they'd taught Mark to use against his victims, I'd learned to use against them. Emma, Martinez called from her desk. You need to see this. The Patterson case files. They're different from what they showed you. Your father wasn't compromised, he was targeted. They doctored evidence to make it look like he'd acted unethically, but we found the originals. They were planning to use this against him no matter what you decided. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by anger. They'd tried to use my love for my family against me, just as Mark had used my capacity for love to deceive me. But this time, I wasn't the same naive person who'd fallen for pretty lies and calculated manipulation. As the night deepened and the scale of what we'd uncovered became clear, I thought about all the other victims, not just of the romance scams, but of this entire corrupt system. How many lives had been ruined in service of their ordered society? How many people had been manipulated, blackmailed, destroyed to maintain their power structure? Rachel brought coffee and sandwiches as we continued working through the night. "You know they won't give up easily," she said, watching me pore over documents. "These people, they're used to winning." "That's their weakness," I replied, thinking of Mark's arrogance, Caroline's taunting messages, the condescending way the senator had offered me power in exchange for silence. They're so convinced of their superiority that they can't imagine being outsmarted. They think money and influence are the only forms of power that matter. Martinez joined us, adding another stack of files to our growing collection of evidence. We've identified at least 30 judges who've been compromised, dozens of politicians, corporate leaders. This is going to be the biggest corruption scandal in American history. I thought about the woman I'd been just months ago standing in that Maui hotel room with $26 to my name. They'd tried to break me, but instead, they'd forced me to become stronger than they could have imagined. Every lesson in deception they'd taught through Mark, every manipulation technique they'd perfected, had become tools in my arsenal for exposing the truth. My phone buzzed one final time. "You've made a serious mistake, Emma. There are some doors that shouldn't be opened." I showed the message to Martinez and Rachel, and we all shared the same grim smile. They still thought they were in control, still believed their threats could silence the truth. They had no idea that while they'd been playing their power games, we'd been systematically dismantling their entire house of cards. Tomorrow, the real trial would begin, not just of Mark and Caroline, but of an entire system of corruption and manipulation. The evidence was secured, the witnesses protected, the truth ready to be revealed. They had built their power on secrets and lies, on the assumption that their victims would be too afraid or too broken to fight back. They were about to learn just how wrong they'd been. The secure FBI safe house buzzed with activity as dawn broke over Seattle. Screens displayed news coverage from across the country. The first waves of Project Mirror revelations were hitting the media. Agent Martinez coordinated teams via secure channels while Rachel helped me organize the flood of incoming information from whistleblowers who'd been silenced for years. My father arrived from Portland at sunrise, his face drawn with concern and determination. The proof we'd uncovered about his case had been a turning point, evidence that Project Mirror had been manipulating the justice system long before they'd targeted me through Mark. "The Attorney General just authorized a multi-state task force," he announced, setting his briefcase on the conference table. "They're moving on locations in Washington, Oregon, and California simultaneously." "But Emma..." He paused, his expression grave. "Judge Lancaster disappeared an hour ago. Her security detail found her home empty, signs of a hasty departure." The news sent a ripple of tension through the room. Judge Lancaster had been our strongest link to the upper echelons of Project Mirror. Her flight suggested they were implementing contingency plans we hadn't anticipated. My phone lit up with an encrypted message. "Congratulations on moving your pieces so effectively. But did you really think we wouldn't have a failsafe? Check the Seattle Prep Registry from your teaching days. Pay special attention to the parent. Contact information." The blood drained from my face as I pulled up my old class records. There, buried in emergency contact forms and field trip permissions, was a pattern I'd missed completely. Certain parents, ones I now recognized as Project Mirror operatives, had systematically placed their children in my class over the years. I hadn't just been gathering information during parent-teacher conferences. I'd been an unwitting hub in their surveillance network. They didn't just choose me because I was naive, I realized aloud. They chose me because my position gave them access to family dynamics they couldn't observe otherwise. Children talk about their parents' meetings, their phone calls, their late-night conversations. Martinez immediately dispatched agents to secure the school's records. We need to identify every family potentially compromised through this connection. If they've been using educational institutions as intelligence gathering points. She was interrupted by Rachel, who burst in clutching her laptop. You need to see this. Someone just dumped a massive file on the dark web, detailed logs, of every operation Project Mirror has run through the school system. Not just Seattle Prep, but dozens of schools across the coast. The files were overwhelming in their scope. Teachers, administrators, guidance counselors, all carefully selected and manipulated into becoming unwitting intelligence assets. Some, like me, through romantic entrapment. Others through financial pressure, blackmail, or the promise of career advancement. They're burning their own operation, Martinez observed, scanning through the data. But why? This level of disclosure. My father's phone rang, cutting through the tension. His face darkened as he listened. The Vancouver connection just broke. Canadian authorities raided a series of properties connected to Project Mirror. They found evidence of a much larger operation, international in scope. This wasn't just about controlling the West Coast. They were building a global network. A new message flashed on my screen. Getting warmer, Emma, but you still haven't found the heart of it all. Remember our first date? The restaurant wasn't chosen by chance. The memory hit me like a physical blow. The upscale Seattle restaurant where Mark had first asked me out, owned by a prestigious family, frequented by the city's elite. I'd been so captivated by his charm that I hadn't noticed how he'd orchestrated the entire evening to expose me to specific people, specific conversations. The restaurant was a hub, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. They own properties all over the coast, high-end establishments where people talk freely, where deals are made, where secrets are shared over expensive wine. Rachel was already pulling up property records. The same investment group owns dozens of similar venues, hotels, restaurants, private clubs. They've created a network of listening posts disguised as luxury establishments. Martinez mobilized teams to secure the locations, but I knew we were missing something. Project Mirror wouldn't be exposing their own infrastructure without a reason. They were leading us somewhere, but where? The answer came from an unexpected source. A junior agent burst in, waving a printout. We found something in the Patterson case files, a connection to an old shipping company, Western Maritime Alliance. They've been dormant for years, but their corporate structure matches the pattern we're seeing in Project Mirror's operations. My father's expression changed. Western Maritime. They were peripheral players in the dock workers case. I never could prove their involvement, but... Pull up their records, Martinez ordered. Within minutes, we were staring at a complex web of shell companies and hidden ownership stakes. Western Maritime Alliance wasn't just a shipping company. It was the original foundation of Project Mirror's empire. The ports, I breathed, understanding dawning. They control the ports. That's how they've moved their operations internationally, without detection. The luxury venues gather intelligence. The schools provide social mapping, but the ports. That's their real power base. As if on cue, alerts began flooding in. Port authorities up and down the coast were reporting anomalies. Missing shipping containers, altered manifests, entire cargo holds that didn't match their documentation. They're not just burning the operation, Martinez realized. They're extracting something something big enough to need their entire maritime infrastructure to move it. Rachel tracked the alerts on a digital map, a pattern emerging. The discrepancies all lead to a single container ship leaving Seattle in 6 hours, the Meridian Star. My phone buzzed again. Very good, Emma. You're finally asking the right questions. Care to see what a decade of Project Mirror's real work looks like? The Meridian Star awaits. Come alone, or what's on board disappears forever. Martinez immediately began organizing an intercept operation, but I knew we were running out of time. Project Mirror had spent years building their intelligence empire, gathering secrets and leverage. Whatever was on that ship represented the culmination of their work. I have to go, I said, cutting through the tactical discussion. They'll scuttle the ship if they detect law enforcement. We need to know what they're trying to move. Absolutely not, my father protested. Emma, these people, they're desperate now, dangerous. But I met his eyes steadily. They taught Mark how to manipulate people. Mark taught me everything he knew, thinking I was just an adoring wife learning to understand his work. I can handle them. Martinez hesitated, then nodded slowly. We'll keep our distance, but we'll be ready. The minute we confirm what's on that ship. I'll signal you, I promised, already gathering what I'd need. Rachel hugged me fiercely, slipping something into my pocket. A small tracking device, disguised as a compact mirror. The drive to the port felt surreal. Security waved me through with practiced indifference, more evidence of Project Mirror's influence. The Meridian Star loomed ahead, a massive cargo vessel that would soon attempt to smuggle a decade of secrets out of the country. As I approached the gangway, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Michelle, or Margaret Chen, as we now knew her. She looked different from our last meeting, harder somehow. They said you'd come, she said simply. Some of us bet against it, but the senior partners. They insisted you wouldn't be able to resist solving the final puzzle. And what puzzle is that? She smiled thinly. Come see for yourself. Welcome to Project Mirror's true legacy. The ship's interior was a maze of corridors and sealed containers. Margaret led me deeper into its bowels, where the regular cargo holds gave way to something else entirely. A sophisticated command center hidden within the vessel's structure. And there, surrounded by screens and servers, stood Senator Morrison and the mysterious young man from our previous meeting. But it was what the screens displayed that made my blood run cold. Real-time feeds from thousands of sources: homes, offices, schools, government buildings. Project Mirror hadn't just been gathering leverage. They'd created the most extensive private surveillance network in history. Beautiful, isn't it? Morrison asked, gesturing at the displays. A decade of work, millions of data points, all feeding into a single system capable of predicting and controlling human behavior on a massive scale. I stared at the screens, understanding finally dawning. This isn't about blackmail or political control. This is about something much bigger. The young man smiled. We call it social architecture, the ability to shape society itself through the careful application of information. And now, thanks to your meddling, we're forced to move our entire operation offshore. Unless what? Unless you join us, Emma. For real this time. Not as a pawn like before, but as a full partner. Help us rebuild. Better and stronger than before. After all, you're proof that our methods work. Look how we shaped you, molded you from a naive teacher into someone capable of bringing down an entire network. I let them talk. Let them believe their own mythology as my hand slipped into my pocket, fingers closing around Rachel's tracking device. They thought they'd created me, shaped me into their perfect weapon. They didn't understand that every manipulation, every lie, every betrayal had taught me something they hadn't intended: how to dismantle their entire world. The signal was sent. Now it was just a matter of time. The command center's screens cast an eerie blue glow across Senator Morrison's face as he continued his pitch, unaware that FBI tactical teams were already moving into position around the Meridian Star. I kept my expression neutral, channeling everything Mark had inadvertently taught me about maintaining a convincing facade. "Think about the implications, Emma." Morrison gestured to a particularly large display showing interconnected data streams. "Every major decision, every societal shift, every cultural movement, all of it carefully guided for the greater good. No more chaos, no more unpredictability. Pure order." Margaret Chen moved to a control panel, her fingers dancing across the keys. "We've already proven the model works on a small scale. The Seattle tech sector, Portland's environmental policies, Vancouver's real estate market, all shaped according to our designs through targeted information control." The young man, who'd finally introduced himself as Dr. Alexander Pierce, pulled up a series of graphs. "These represent social behavior patterns across major West Coast cities. Watch what happens when we introduce controlled variables. A strategic scandal here, a timely revelation there." The graphs shifted dramatically, showing how Project Mirror had manipulated entire communities through their network of surveillance and controlled information. It was fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. "And my marriage?" I asked, careful to keep my tone curious rather than accusatory. "Was that just another controlled variable?" Morrison's smile was almost paternal. "Your relationship with David was designed to serve multiple purposes. Yes, we needed your position at Seattle Prep, but more importantly, we needed to test our behavioral modification protocols. Everything, from your initial meeting to the final betrayal in Maui, was choreographed to transform you into someone capable of understanding our vision." My earpiece crackled softly. Martinez's team was in position. I just needed to keep them talking, keep them revealing more of their operation. "The other victims, were they all part of the same experiment?" "Victims is such a limited perspective," Pierce interjected. "Think of them as participants in humanity's greatest evolutionary leap. Some were meant to be broken, others strengthened. You, Emma, exceeded all expectations. You turned adversity into advancement, precisely as our models predicted." A subtle vibration from my phone indicated that Rachel had successfully infiltrated the ship's communication system. One more minute was all we needed to complete the electronic intrusion. "Show her the Nexus," Morrison commanded, and Margaret typed rapidly at her station. The screens shifted to display what looked like a massive neural network. "This is the culmination of Project Mirror, a predictive AI system fed by our surveillance network. It doesn't just track behavior, it anticipates it, shapes it, controls it." The scale of their ambition was staggering. They hadn't just built a blackmail operation or a political manipulation scheme. They'd created a system designed to control the very fabric of society. "Why tell me all this?" I asked, buying more precious seconds. "Why risk exposing everything?" Pierce's expression turned calculating. "Because the system has predicted every possible outcome of this situation, and in each successful scenario, you join us. Your unique combination of intelligence, adaptability, and first-hand experience with our methods makes you invaluable to the next phase." A notification flashed across one of the smaller screens, a security alert that Margaret quickly dismissed. The FBI's cyber team had begun their infiltration of Project Mirror's databases. "And if I refuse?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. Morrison's smile faded slightly. "That would be unfortunate. The system has also predicted those scenarios. They don't end well for anyone involved." The young man moved to another console, pulling up what appeared to be contingency protocols. "We've prepared for every possibility, Emma. Right now, similar facilities exist on vessels in ports across the globe. If this location is compromised, the entire operation transfers seamlessly to backup sites. You can't stop what we've built. You can only choose whether to be part of it. Ooh, my earpiece crackled again, the signal to move. But before I could respond, new alerts began flooding the screens. Project Mirror's security systems had detected the electronic intrusion. Such a disappointment, Morrison sighed, reaching for what looked like a standard tablet. Initiate Protocol Omega. The screens suddenly filled with countdown timers. Margaret's fingers flew across her keyboard, initiating what appeared to be a massive data transfer. A simple choice, Emma, Pierce said calmly. Help us complete this transfer, and you become part of humanity's next great leap forward. Refuse, and everything, including this vessel and everyone on it, disappears into the Puget Sound. The next few moments happened in rapid succession. FBI tactical teams breached the ship's exterior, their entry charges creating controlled explosions that rocked the command center. Morrison's tablet slipped from his grasp, skittering across the floor toward me. Margaret reached for what was clearly a weapon concealed beneath her station. But they had made one crucial miscalculation. While everyone's attention was focused on the external breach, Rachel's cyber infiltration had already accomplished its true objective. Every piece of data Project Mirror attempted to transfer was being rerouted, not to their backup sites, but to secure FBI servers. It's over, I said, dropping the compliant facade. Your network is compromised, your database is seized, your backup sites identified. There is no Protocol Omega. Morrison's composed mask finally cracked. You have no idea what you're interfering with. The system is the only thing standing between civilization and chaos. No, I countered, as FBI agents flooded the command center. The system is the chaos. Real order comes from transparency, from justice, from truth, not from manipulation and control. As agents secured the room's occupants, Martinez herself approached, surveying the sprawling command center with a mixture of awe and disgust. The Attorney General is going to have a field day with this, the amount of illegal surveillance alone. Rachel appeared in the doorway, laptop in hand. We've secured their entire database, Project Mirror's complete operational history, every manipulation, every scheme, every participant. It's all documented. Pierce, being led away in handcuffs, called over his shoulder, "You think this ends here? We're just one iteration. There are others, bigger systems, more powerful players. You've learned nothing." But he was wrong. I had learned everything. About power, about manipulation, about the difference between control and genuine change. Mark and Project Mirror had tried to break me, to remake me in their image. Instead, they'd given me the tools to break their entire system. The ship's command center was a hive of activity now, as federal agents documented and dismantled Project Mirror's nerve center. Each screen, each server, each piece of equipment represented years of calculated manipulation, all in service of their twisted vision of social control. My phone buzzed one final time, a message from an unknown number. "Congratulations, Emma. You've graduated beyond our wildest expectations. But remember, every system needs an architect. When you're ready to build something better, you know where to find us." I showed the message to Martinez, who immediately began tracing its origin. But I already knew it didn't matter. Project Mirror's leaders might be in custody, their immediate operation dismantled, but their message had spread. Somewhere, others were watching, learning, planning their own versions of social architecture. As dawn broke over the Seattle waterfront, I stood on the ship's deck watching FBI teams process evidence and secure prisoners. Rachel joined me, wrapping a warm jacket around my shoulders. "What happens now?" she asked softly. I thought about everything we'd uncovered: the surveillance network, the behavior modification protocols, the attempt to control society itself. Now we make sure this never happens again. We expose every operation, every manipulation, every participant. Not for revenge, but for truth. The sun rose over the Puget Sound, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere in a federal holding facility, Mark, or David, or whatever his real name was, would be learning about the fall of the organization he'd served so faithfully. The man who'd thought he could break me, remold me, use me as a pawn in their grand scheme. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to create their perfect system of control, Project Mirror had instead created their own downfall. They'd taught their operatives too well, shown them all the mechanisms of manipulation and power. And in me, they'd created something they never intended. Someone who could see through their illusions, dismantle their schemes, and expose their entire operation to the light of day. Martinez approached with a tablet displaying news headlines, already breaking across the country. Project Mirror exposed. Massive surveillance network uncovered. FBI raids reveal international social control operation. Seattle teacher brings down criminal empire. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much larger fight. Not against any single organization, but against the very idea that society could or should be controlled through manipulation and deceit. The Meridian Star, once meant to smuggle Project Mirror's operation to safety, would instead become evidence of their downfall. And I, the naive teacher they'd tried to use as a pawn, had become something entirely different, a symbol of resistance against those who would try to architect humanity's future through lies and manipulation. As federal agents continued their work around us, I thought about all the other victims out there, not just of Project Mirror, but of every system that sought to control through deception. They deserve to know the truth. They deserve to understand how these mechanisms of control operated, and I would make sure they learned everything. 6 months after the raid on the Meridian Star, I sat in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., preparing to testify before a Senate Intelligence Committee. The room buzzed with tension as journalists and spectators filed in, all eager to hear first-hand accounts of Project Mirror's operations. Senator Elizabeth Chen, no relation to Margaret, led the questioning. Her reputation for incisive investigation had made her the perfect choice to head the committee investigating social manipulation networks. The elegant wood-paneled chamber felt impossibly large as I took my seat at the witness table. Ms. Wilson, Senator Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. Please tell the committee about the educational recruitment aspect of Project Mirror's operations. I leaned into the microphone, my hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. Project Mirror deliberately targeted educators, particularly those with access to influential families. They understood that teachers often have unique insights into family dynamics, power structures, and potential pressure points within communities. The testimony I was about to give would expose not just Project Mirror, but similar operations we'd uncovered across the country. Rachel, sitting in the gallery, gave me an encouraging nod. She'd spent months helping me compile evidence, tracking patterns of manipulation that stretched from coast to coast. We've identified at least 37 schools where Project Mirror placed operatives, I continued. These weren't just random placements. They specifically chose institutions that served the children of politicians, judges, business leaders, anyone with significant influence or access to sensitive information. The committee members studied the documents before them, detailed breakdowns of how Project Mirror had weaponized the education system. Through seemingly innocent parent-teacher conferences, school events, and casual conversations, they'd built an unprecedented intelligence network. A new senator, freshly appointed after his predecessor's implication in the scandal, leaned forward. And these operatives, they were all recruited through methods similar to your experience? Not all, I replied, thinking of the various victims we'd interviewed. Some were manipulated through financial pressure, others through blackmail. But the common thread was always the same. They identified people with access to information and systematically worked to control them. The hearing continued for hours as I detailed Project Mirror's methodologies. Each revelation drew gasps from the audience. The sophisticated behavior prediction algorithms, the targeted manipulation of social networks, the careful grooming of assets at every level of society. During a brief recess, Officer Martinez, now promoted to special agent, approached with new information. "We've just received confirmation from Interpol. They've located Judge Lancaster in Montenegro. She's agreed to cooperate in exchange for consideration in sentencing." The news sent ripples through our team. Lancaster's testimony could help us understand the true scope of Project Mirror's international connections. But something about the timing felt off. Back in session, Senator Chen introduced new evidence: financial records showing massive transfers to educational foundations across Europe and Asia. Ms. Wilson, in your expert opinion, could these transactions indicate similar operations internationally? Before I could answer, my phone vibrated with an encrypted message. "You're asking the wrong questions, Emma. The schools were never the endgame. Look deeper. Remember the children's art program?" The message hit me like a physical blow. The annual student art exhibition at Seattle Prep, a seemingly innocent showcase of creativity that Project Mirror had insisted on sponsoring. I'd helped organize it, proud of giving my students a platform for expression. "Senator," I said, my mind racing, "I need to amend my previous testimony. The educational system wasn't just about gathering intelligence. They were using student art programs to embed coded messages in plain sight." The committee chambers erupted in murmurs as I explained. Project Mirror had developed a sophisticated system of visual cryptography, using student artwork as a cover for transmitting sensitive information internationally. The annual exhibitions exchanged between partner schools worldwide created a perfect covert communication network. Rachel was already pulling up images on her laptop, innocent-looking student paintings that, when processed through Project Mirror's proprietary algorithms, revealed layers of encrypted data. The art program had created an undetectable international dead drop system. "This is why they targeted teachers specifically," I explained, my voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. "We had the perfect cover for organizing these exhibitions, for encouraging student participation, for selecting which pieces would be displayed and exchanged." Special Agent Martinez immediately began coordinating with international law enforcement. If Project Mirror had been using student art programs as communication networks, every exhibition, every exchange program, every international student showcase needed to be examined. During the next break, Rachel showed me what she'd found in the digital archives. The program goes back at least 15 years. Look at the participating schools, all in strategic locations near centers of power: Washington, D.C., London, Brussels, Beijing. My phone buzzed again. "Now you're seeing the bigger picture, but you still haven't found the key. Remember, what Mark taught you about hidden patterns." I closed my eyes, remembering the lessons Mark had unknowingly given me during our marriage. His obsession with patterns, with hidden meanings, with layers of significance. Then it hit me. "The children," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They weren't just using the artwork to transmit messages. They were identifying gifted students, kids with specific talents or access. They were grooming the next generation of operatives." The revelation sparked a new phase of the investigation. Project Mirror hadn't just been manipulating current power structures. They'd been playing a long game, identifying and influencing potential future leaders from an early age. As the hearing resumed, I shared this insight with the committee. Senator Chen's expression grew increasingly grave as she understood the implications. They've been building a pipeline of influence, targeting children who might one day hold positions of power. The gallery erupted in chaos as parents in the audience realized their children might have been unknowingly evaluated, marked, and groomed by Project Mirror's operators. The committee called for order as reporters rushed to file updates on this new dimension of the scandal. Special Agent Martinez received urgent messages from field offices across the country. Similar patterns were being uncovered in student exchange programs, international academic competitions, even online gaming communities frequented by children of influential families. During the final session of the day, I presented evidence of how Project Mirror had used sophisticated psychological profiling to identify potential recruits among students. They looked for specific traits: pattern recognition, emotional intelligence, adaptability, the same characteristics they'd identified in me when they'd selected me as Mark's target. This wasn't just about gathering intelligence or manipulating current power structures, I testified. They were creating a self-perpetuating system, ensuring their influence would continue through generations. Every art exhibition, every student exchange, every international competition was an opportunity to identify and begin grooming future assets. As the hearing concluded, Senator Chen announced the formation of a special task force dedicated to protecting educational institutions from manipulation. But I knew this was just the beginning. Project Mirror's influence had spread further and deeper than anyone had imagined. Back in my hotel room that evening, I reviewed the day's revelations with Rachel and Martinez. The scale of what we'd uncovered was staggering. A multi-generational program of influence and control, using the education system as both a gathering tool and a recruitment pipeline. My phone lit up with one final message. "Impressive work, Emma. But remember, for every system you expose, 2 more are being built. The game never ends. The players just get smarter. Ready for the next level?" I showed the message to Martinez, who immediately began tracing its origin. But I was already thinking ahead, understanding that Project Mirror had been just one manifestation of a larger problem: the manipulation of social systems, the grooming of future power players, the hidden networks of influence. These weren't unique to one organization. Rachel touched my arm gently. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we need to go deeper," I replied, my teacher's instinct for pattern recognition kicking in. Project Mirror didn't invent these techniques. They just systematized them. Somewhere out there, others are watching, learning, adapting. We need to understand not just how these systems work, but why they work. Martinez nodded slowly. "You're talking about more than just investigation and prosecution. You're talking about prevention." "Exactly. We need to develop tools to identify these operations before they take root, to protect vulnerable institutions and individuals, to teach people, especially young people, how to recognize and resist manipulation." As night fell over Washington, D.C., I stood at my hotel window, watching the lights of the Capitol glitter below. Somewhere out there, new networks were forming, new systems of control being developed, but this time, we wouldn't be caught unprepared. The next phase of our work was just beginning. It wasn't enough to expose one organization or dismantle one network. We needed to understand the underlying patterns, the social vulnerabilities, that made such manipulation possible. Only then could we hope to create real, lasting change. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "The next piece awaits. Remember the summer programming camp at Seattle Prep? Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight." I smiled grimly. They thought they were still leading me, still controlling the flow of information. But every message, every clue, every breadcrumb they dropped brought us closer to understanding the full scope of their operations. The game wasn't over. It was evolving, and so were we. The Seattle Preparatory Academy's computer lab hummed with artificial silence as I stood in the doorway, memories flooding back. Summer programming camps had been Mark's idea, a supposedly enriching activity for gifted students that I'd enthusiastically supported. Now, examining the room with fresh eyes, I noticed details I'd overlooked before. Special Agent Martinez moved past me, her team already setting up specialized equipment to scan the systems. The camp records show they used custom educational software. Said it was for teaching coding basics, but our tech team thinks it was something else entirely. Rachel sat at one of the workstations, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she dug through archived program files. The summer camp's innocent facade had hidden something far more insidious, a sophisticated screening system designed to identify and evaluate potential future assets. "Look at this," Rachel called out, turning her screen toward us. The coding exercises weren't just teaching programming, they were psychological assessments. Each challenge was designed to measure specific traits, problem-solving abilities, pattern recognition, ethical flexibility. My throat tightened as I remembered enthusiastically recommending students for the program, unknowingly helping Project Mirror evaluate potential recruits. The software had seemed so innovative, encouraging creative thinking and unique solutions. Now I understood why. A new message illuminated my phone. The programming was just the beginning. Check the linguistics lab. Remember those special translation exercises? The linguistics lab, 2 floors up, had been my pride and joy, a state-of-the-art facility for teaching foreign languages. I'd been thrilled when Mark's Connections had secured funding for new software, supposedly designed to help students master complex translation skills. Martinez's team quickly discovered the truth. The translation exercises had contained embedded patterns, training young minds to recognize and decode hidden messages. While students thought they were learning Mandarin or Russian, they were actually being conditioned to understand Project Mirror's sophisticated communication protocols. They were creating sleeper agents, Martinez realized, examining the data. Kids who could naturally recognize and interpret their coded messages without even knowing they'd been trained to do it. Some of these students are in college now, potentially, positioned in internships near centers of power. Rachel pulled up a list of summer camp graduates. Look where they ended up. Congressional pages, judicial clerks, entry-level positions in tech companies with government contracts. Project Mirror wasn't just grooming them for future recruitment. They were creating an unwitting network of message interceptors and transmitters. The implications were staggering. These students, now young adults, might be unconsciously processing and passing along Project Mirror's communications without any awareness of their role. The organization had effectively created a human mesh network for their intelligence-gathering operations. My phone chimed again, getting warmer. But you still haven't found the core. Think bigger. Why focus on just one school when you can influence an entire educational system? The message sparked a memory, a seemingly mundane conference Mark had encouraged me to attend, focused on standardizing educational software across multiple school districts. At the time, it had seemed like a positive step toward educational equity. "Martinez," I called out, already pulling up the conference records on my laptop. "I need you to look into the Educational Technology Standardization Initiative. 3 years ago, they pushed for unified software platforms across public and private schools in the Pacific Northwest. The investigation quickly revealed a disturbing pattern. The Standardization Initiative had been a front, allowing Project Mirror to install their evaluation and conditioning software across hundreds of schools. They hadn't just compromised Seattle Prep. They'd infiltrated entire educational networks. Rachel discovered something even more disturbing in the code. The software doesn't just evaluate students. It adapts its content based on their responses, subtly guiding them toward specific patterns of thinking. They've automated the grooming process. As we dug deeper, we found layers of sophistication that took our breath away. The educational software contained what amounted to a passive recruiting system, identifying potential assets, shaping their development, and flagging them for future activation. Martinez received an urgent call from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. They've found similar patterns in educational software worldwide. This isn't just about creating message interceptors anymore. They're engineering social networks, positioning assets in key locations before they're even old enough to understand what's happening. A teenager's voice in the hallway made us all freeze. Summer classes were still in session, and students were moving between rooms. Looking at their innocent faces through the lab window, I felt a surge of protective anger. These kids had no idea they were being evaluated, conditioned, and potentially recruited by an invisible system. My phone lit up with another message. Now you're seeing it. The future belongs to those who shape it. These kids are just the beginning. Check the guidance counselor's college recommendation protocols. The guidance office yielded another layer of Project Mirror's operation. The college recommendation system had been subtly manipulated to direct promising students toward specific institutions, schools where the organization had established influence. Look at these assessment criteria, Rachel said, examining the digital records. They're not just evaluating academic performance. They're measuring susceptibility to influence, capacity for discretion, potential for future access to sensitive information. Martinez's team discovered that the recommendation algorithms contained hidden weightings. Students who displayed desired traits were subtly guided toward career paths that would position them near centers of power: law, politics, technology, finance. They're creating sleeper networks that won't activate for years, Martinez observed, her expression grim. Some of these kids won't realize they've been compromised until they're already in positions of influence. A data analyst from Martinez's team rushed in with new findings. The educational software contained sophisticated tracking systems, monitoring not just student performance, but their entire digital footprint, social media activity, online behaviors, communication patterns. They're building comprehensive psychological profiles, the analyst explained. By the time these students graduate, Project Mirror knows everything about them: their strengths, weaknesses, pressure points, potential vulnerabilities. Rachel had been cross-referencing student records with known Project Mirror operations. It's not just about future recruitment. They're identifying students with family connections to their current targets. Every parent-teacher conference, every school event, every student achievement becomes an intelligence-gathering opportunity. My phone buzzed insistently. The real question isn't what we've done. It's what happens to all these carefully positioned pieces now that you've exposed the system. Can you protect them from those who would step into the void? The message hit home. Exposing Project Mirror's educational operation was just the beginning. These students, past and present, were now vulnerable to other organizations that might try to exploit their unconscious conditioning. Martinez was already coordinating with the FBI's cyber division to develop countermeasures. We need to identify everyone who's been through these programs, find ways to alert them without causing panic. Some of these kids are already in sensitive positions. Rachel discovered something else in the software code: a dormant activation protocol. They built in triggers, she explained, her voice tense. Specific phrases or images that could activate the conditioned responses they installed. These kids are basically walking time bombs of information gathering. The implications were staggering. Project Mirror hadn't just created a network of unwitting agents. They'd engineered a generational infiltration of power structures that could persist even after their organization was dismantled. As evening fell, casting long shadows through the computer lab windows, we faced the enormity of what we'd uncovered. This wasn't just about exposing past operations or preventing future ones. We needed to find ways to protect and deprogram an entire generation that had been unknowingly conditioned. My phone delivered one final message of the day. Congratulations on understanding the scope. But remember, education was just one vector. While you've been focusing on schools, our other systems have been operating unchecked, ready to find out what else you missed. I showed the message to Martinez, who immediately began coordinating with other FBI units. But I was already thinking ahead, recognizing that Project Mirror's educational operation was probably just one facet of a much larger system of social engineering. Rachel touched my arm gently. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about all the other institutions we take for granted," I replied, watching students leave the building for the day. If they could infiltrate education this thoroughly, What other systems have they compromised? Healthcare? Religious organizations? Social services? Martinez nodded grimly. We need to expand our investigation. Every institution that deals with vulnerable or influential populations needs to be examined. As we prepared to leave the computer lab, I took one last look at the room where so many young minds had been unknowingly evaluated and conditioned. The real work was just beginning. We needed to find ways to protect these students, to help them recognize and resist manipulation, to ensure they could make truly free choices about their futures. The Seattle skyline glowed in the distance as we drove away from the school, each of us lost in thought about the magnitude of what we'd discovered. Project Mirror hadn't just created a network of compromised individuals. They'd engineered a self-perpetuating system of influence that could outlive their organization. My phone remained silent for the rest of the evening, but I knew more. Messages would come. More breadcrumbs leading to other aspects of their operation. More revelations about the extent of their influence. More challenges to unravel and combat. The game wasn't just continuing, it was expanding. And somewhere out there, other organizations were watching, learning, preparing to fill the void Project Mirror had left behind. The question wasn't just how to expose these operations, but how to protect society from becoming dependent on them. The real work was just beginning. Autumn rain pelted the windows of the private medical facility in downtown Seattle as I followed Special Agent Martinez through sterile corridors. The message that had brought us here was simple. Healthcare networks hold more than just medical records. Remember the wellness program at Seattle Prep? The facility's director, Dr. Sarah Jensen, met us in a conference room filled with monitors, displaying patient data flows. Her expression was grave as she explained what her team had discovered. The school's wellness program, supposedly designed to monitor student health and stress levels, had been collecting far more than basic medical information. Look at these data patterns, Dr. Jensen said, pulling up a series of graphs. The wellness monitors they gave to students weren't just tracking physical metrics. They were gathering psychological data, sleep patterns, social interactions, creating comprehensive behavioral profiles. Rachel, who had been analyzing the program's software architecture, found something even more disturbing. The monitors were synchronized with the educational software we found in the computer lab. They were correlating physical responses with specific learning modules, refining their conditioning techniques in real time. Martinez's team had brought in Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a specialist in neuropsychology. These patterns are sophisticated, she observed, studying the data. They weren't just gathering information, they were using biofeedback to optimize their influence techniques. The physical data helped them identify when students were most susceptible to their messaging. My phone buzzed with a new message. The body doesn't lie, Emma. Vital signs tell us more than any interrogation ever could. Why do you think we insisted on those regular health screenings for all staff? The memory hit me like a physical blow. The mandatory health screenings Mark had implemented for teachers, claiming they were part of an enhanced benefits package. We'd all been so grateful for the comprehensive health care that we never questioned the extensive nature of the tests. Dr. Jensen pulled up more records. The staff screening program was feeding data into Project Mirror's behavioral prediction models. They were monitoring stress responses, hormone levels, sleep quality, anything that might indicate resistance to their influence or potential to break conditioning. Rachel discovered something in the personnel files that made her gasp. The wellness program wasn't just monitoring. Look at these prescription patterns. They were subtly manipulating staff members' medication regimens, small adjustments to anxiety medications, sleep aids, focus enhancers. Martinez immediately began coordinating with the FBI's healthcare fraud division. The implications were staggering. Project Mirror had effectively created a medical surveillance network that extended far beyond Seattle Prep. Dr. Rodriguez identified patterns in the prescription algorithms. They were using medication adjustments to enhance their conditioning programs, increasing susceptibility during key training periods, maintaining emotional stability in their assets, even inducing specific stress responses when they needed to create pressure points. My phone lit up again. Now you're understanding. The body is the key to the mind. Control someone's physical state, and their mental state follows. Check the long-term care facilities. Some secrets are buried in plain sight. The investigation expanded to local nursing homes and rehabilitation centers. Project Mirror had infiltrated healthcare networks at every level, using medical data to identify potential leverage points and maintain control over their assets. Dr. Jensen discovered a pattern in patient transfers. They were moving specific patients between facilities, creating seemingly random connections. But look at the visiting patterns. Family members from different target organizations, crossing paths in waiting rooms, sharing concerns over coffee. They turned healthcare facilities into intelligence-gathering hubs, Martinez realized. Personal conversations, family dynamics, vulnerabilities, all cataloged and analyzed by staff who'd been compromised through their own medical care. Rachel found evidence of systematic manipulation in mental health services. The Employee Assistance Program at Seattle Prep, it wasn't just providing counseling. They were identifying psychological pressure points, creating detailed profiles of emotional vulnerabilities. Dr. Rodriguez examined the counseling protocols. These therapy sessions were structured to elicit specific information while implanting subtle suggestions. They weren't healing people, they were programming them. My phone delivered another cryptic message. Healing and programming, two sides of the same coin. When you understand how to fix something, you also understand how to break it. The Mental Health Network was our masterpiece. The investigation led us to a renowned psychiatric hospital outside Seattle. The facility had received substantial funding from organizations we now knew were Project Mirror fronts. The truth we uncovered there was chilling. They were using legitimate therapeutic techniques to develop their manipulation protocols, Dr. Rodriguez explained, reviewing patient records. Every breakthrough in treating trauma or anxiety became a potential tool for creating emotional leverage. Martinez's team discovered that the hospital's research program had been feeding data directly to Project Mirror's behavior modification specialists. Years of therapeutic insights had been weaponized, turned into sophisticated manipulation techniques. Rachel found a connection that made her blood run cold. The hospital's outreach program. They provided counseling services to schools, corporations, government agencies. Every therapy session was an intelligence-gathering opportunity. Dr. Jensen identified patterns in how Project Mirror had utilized medical data. They weren't just collecting information. They were creating comprehensive profiles of physical and psychological vulnerabilities. Everyone who passed through their healthcare network became a potential pressure point. My phone buzzed insistently. The beautiful thing about healthcare is that everyone needs it eventually. Even the most powerful, the most resistant, the most cautious, they all end up in the system. And we were waiting. The scale of the operation was overwhelming. Project Mirror had effectively turned the healthcare system into a vast intelligence-gathering network, using medical necessity as a cover for systematic surveillance and manipulation. Martinez coordinated with federal healthcare regulators to begin identifying compromised facilities and personnel. But the damage was already done. Years of medical data had been weaponized, used to build detailed profiles of countless individuals. Dr. Rodriguez found evidence that Project Mirror had even infiltrated pharmaceutical research. They were funding studies, influencing drug development. Some of these medications were designed with subtle psychological effects that enhanced their conditioning protocols. Rachel discovered a pattern in how they'd targeted healthcare workers. Look at the staff selection criteria. They weren't just hiring qualified medical professionals. They were identifying people with specific psychological profiles: empaths, who could gather information, pragmatists who could implement their protocols without ethical concerns. My phone delivered a final message for the day. Healthcare was our most elegant solution. No one questions the necessity of medical treatment. No one suspects their doctor of being part of a global intelligence network. And the best part? The system sustains itself. People will always need healing. As night fell over Seattle, we gathered in Dr. Jensen's office to assess the magnitude of what we'd uncovered. Project Mirror hadn't just compromised individual healthcare facilities. They'd created an integrated system of medical surveillance and manipulation that spanned the entire healthcare industry. Martinez was already working with federal authorities to implement safeguards, but the challenge seemed almost insurmountable. How do you protect a system that requires openness and trust to function? How do you maintain medical privacy while preventing the weaponization of healthcare data? Rachel found something in the project files that offered a glimmer of hope. Look at this. There were resistors, healthcare workers who noticed patterns, who questioned protocols, who protected their patients. Not everyone can be compromised. Dr. Rodriguez developed preliminary guidelines for identifying and countering medical manipulation techniques. We need to create awareness without destroying trust in healthcare providers. It's a delicate balance. As we prepared to leave the facility, Dr. Jensen pulled me aside. There's something else you should know. The wellness program at Seattle Prep. It wasn't just gathering data on current students and staff. They were creating generational profiles, tracking health patterns across families. They were playing a very long game. My phone remained silent, but I knew more revelations would come. Project Mirror's healthcare operation was just one facet of their systematic infiltration of essential services. Somewhere out there, other networks were preparing to fill the void, to exploit the vulnerabilities they'd exposed. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle's streets slick and reflective under the streetlights. As we drove back to the FBI field office, I thought about all the people who'd trusted the healthcare system, who'd shared their most intimate concerns and vulnerabilities, never suspecting they were being profiled and manipulated. The work ahead seemed daunting. We needed to find ways to protect medical privacy while maintaining the openness necessary for effective healthcare. We needed to help people recognize manipulation without destroying their trust in medical professionals. We needed to ensure that healing couldn't be weaponized against the vulnerable. But most importantly, we needed to understand that Project Mirror's healthcare operation wasn't unique. They had simply exploited vulnerabilities inherent in any system built on trust and necessity. The challenge wasn't just to dismantle their network, but to protect essential services from being turned into tools of control. The game was evolving, becoming more complex with each revelation. But so were we. The financial district gleamed. In the morning sun as I followed Special Agent Martinez into Pacific Northwest Trust's Seattle headquarters. 1 year had passed since that fateful morning in Maui, and today we would finally uncover the last piece of Project Mirror's operation. Thomas Reynolds, the bank's lead forensic accountant, met us in a secure conference room where screens displayed complex financial data streams. "What we've found goes beyond simple banking," he began, his expression grave. They weren't just tracking money, they were mapping human behavior through financial patterns. Rachel, who had been analyzing years of transaction data, pulled up a series of intricate diagrams. "Look at these patterns. Every purchase, every transfer, every transaction was feeding into their behavioral prediction models. They turned the entire banking system into a surveillance network." My phone buzzed with a message that felt different from the others. "Ready for the final revelation, Emma?" The money was never the point. It was always about the patterns of human connection. Time to see the full picture. Martinez's team had discovered that Project Mirror used financial data to create detailed maps of social relationships and influence networks. Every transaction told a story. Who was connected to whom? Who held power over whom? Who could be leveraged against whom? But here's where it gets interesting, Reynolds said, pulling up a new set of data. They weren't just gathering intelligence. They were actively shaping social structures through financial manipulation, creating dependencies, engineering conflicts, building hidden power networks. The evidence was overwhelming. Project Mirror had effectively turned the banking system into a vast social engineering experiment. They could predict and influence human behavior by controlling the flow of financial resources. My father, now cleared of all allegations and working with the investigation, arrived with crucial information. We found similar patterns across all major financial institutions. This wasn't just about Seattle or the West Coast. They were building a global network of financial control. Rachel discovered something that made her gasp. Emma, look at this. The banking network. It's connected to everything we've uncovered. The educational system, the healthcare network, every institution they infiltrated. It all ties back to financial control. As we dug deeper, the true scope of Project Mirror's operation became clear. They hadn't just built separate systems of manipulation. They'd created an integrated network where each component reinforced the others. Financial pressure points were used to maintain control over healthcare providers. Medical data was used to identify educational targets. School networks were used to map financial relationships. Martinez received an urgent call from FBI headquarters. Judge Montgomery, recently appointed after the exposure of judiciary infiltration, had signed the final warrants we needed. We're moving on all remaining Project Mirror assets simultaneously, she announced. Every bank, every institution, every front organization. My phone lit up with another message. Impressive work, Emma. You've seen through every layer, unraveled every thread. But ask yourself, in a world built on connected systems, can you ever truly be free from influence? The next few hours were a blur of activity as federal agents moved on locations across the country. Rachel coordinated with cyber teams as they secured data and blocked attempted transfers. Financial networks were locked down, preventing Project Mirror from moving or hiding assets. In the midst of the operation, I received one final message. You've won this round, Emma. But remember, systems of control exist because humans create them. What will you build in their place? That question haunted me as we gathered in the federal courthouse later that day. Judge Montgomery had called an emergency session to hear our findings and recommendations. The gallery was packed with journalists, investigators, and victims of Project Mirror's various operations. Your Honor, I began my testimony. What we've uncovered isn't just a criminal enterprise. It's a fundamental vulnerability in how our society functions. Every system we build to connect people can also be used to control them. I explained how Project Mirror had exploited these vulnerabilities, turning essential services into tools of manipulation. But I also shared what we'd learned about resistance and resilience, how some people had maintained their integrity despite systematic pressure, how small acts of questioning and defiance had created cracks in their perfect system. The solution isn't to dismantle these networks, I concluded. We need these systems, banking, healthcare, education. But we need to rebuild them with conscious resistance to manipulation, transparency where possible, privacy where necessary, and always the recognition that serving human needs shouldn't mean surrendering human agency. As the day drew to a close, Rachel, Martinez, my father, and I gathered in the courthouse garden. The Seattle skyline stretched before us, each building representing countless networks of human connection that could be used for either liberation or control. What happens now? Rachel asked softly. Now we build something better, I replied. Project Mirror showed us how social systems can be weaponized. Our job is to show how they can be shields instead of weapons. Martinez shared news from other jurisdictions. Similar operations were being uncovered worldwide. Our experience in Seattle was becoming a template for exposing and dismantling these networks of control. The sun was setting over Puget Sound as we left the courthouse. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, stranded in Maui with nothing but $26 and a broken heart. Mark had thought he was breaking me, but instead he'd helped create something Project Mirror. Never intended. Someone who could see through their illusions and help others do the same. As we drove through the city, each streetlight represented a point of connection in the vast human network that surrounded us. Project Mirror had tried to turn these connections into chains. Our job now was to transform them into bridges. The game wasn't ending. It was evolving into something new. A contest not between controllers and controlled, but between those who would use social systems as weapons and those who would transform them into tools for human flourishing. They had taught me every trick, every manipulation, every method of control. Now, I would use that knowledge to help others protect themselves, to build systems resistant to manipulation, to create networks that connected without controlling. The Seattle night sparkled with possibility as we pulled up to my new apartment. Somewhere out there, other organizations were watching, learning, preparing to fill the void Project Mirror left behind. But this time, we weren't starting from zero. We had understanding, experience, and most importantly, hope. I thought about all the other victims out there, not just of Project Mirror, but of every system that sought to control through deception. They deserved to know the truth. They deserved to understand how these mechanisms of control operated. And now, they would. The game would continue, but the rules had changed. And we were ready. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.